Hi, my name is Peter Comeau. I'm Director of Acoustic Design for IAG Group, and my background is in retailing, manufacturing, and I used to review for all the major hi-fi magazines until I joined Mission in 1999, where actually one of my first products was this little baby here, the Mission 780, which went on to win Product of the Year for What Hi-Fi for 2 years running. Nowadays, I work with all the IAG brands, which include Mission and Wharfedale, Castle and Quad. And actually, I'm in awe of all these brands because I grew up with them as a teenager. They were the mainstay of British hi-fi at the time. In fact, one of my first loudspeakers was built from a Wharfedale kit, and I did a lot of experimentation with the cabinets for that. And that's partially the reason I'm here talking to you today about the products that IAG manufactures. So a lot of people ask me, are modern speakers actually better than the speakers that were produced in, say, the 70s or the 80s? To which my answer is always yes. We now know a lot more about how speaker drive units operate. We have much more advanced technologies that we can call upon, and we use software that enables us to design speakers which are more accurate, clearer, deliver more musical detail than ever before. But there are some classics that I always like to go back to. For example, the original Quad Electrostatic, still an amazing sounding speaker even today because of its absolute purity in the mid-band. And of course, we've got the up-to-date Quad Electrostatic, which built on that technology and brings it right into today's performance. There are also classics which have stood the test of time. Mission 770, some of the older Wharfedales I still enjoy listening to. And the Linton here is a product which is, if you like, an up-to-date version of what I consider to be one of Wharfedale's classic loudspeakers. But what we can do now is, with advanced materials and the advanced technology that we build into these brands, we can now really serve the quality of modern recordings, which of course are also improved over what I was listening to anyway in the 60s and 70s. And that technology concerns aspects like the AMT treble unit that we use in the Elysian range, the special porting systems which were developed originally by Gilbert Briggs for Wharfedale, but which I've researched and produced into what we now call the slot-loaded profiled port, the SLPP system that we use on Elysian and Evo, and aspects like the dome mid-range on Evo, which is really an extraordinary performance. So when I was starting looking at loudspeakers in my youth, one of the things that fascinated me was the differences in quality between them. I was searching for something which sounded more lifelike, more accurate, and that seemed to be difficult to achieve. Well, thankfully, now that we have these new technologies, new materials, new software to use, we can achieve that accuracy in every speaker that we produce. But accuracy isn't everything. Accuracy might get you the resemblance of the human voice or instruments in front of you in your listening room, but it doesn't necessarily give you the enjoyment of music that you get when you go to a live concert. Now, I go to a lot of live concerts because A, because I enjoy them, and B, because I like to keep my ear trained for what real voices and real instruments sound like. And I love putting together loudspeaker systems that recreate the emotion and excitement of the live performance. Now, we're dealing, of course, in a lot of cases with a studio performance, something that is recorded maybe over many sessions and then put together later on. But what the producer is trying to do is to give you that feeling, that emotion that you will get from hearing live performers as if they were in your living room. And that's what I want to put into my loudspeaker designs. I want you to sit there so entranced by the music, you just want to go on playing through your record collection or your downloads or your CDs or whatever medium you're using to recreate that sound of the performers, the real performers in your living room. Now, in a loudspeaker, there are lots and lots of individual parts. You not only have the drive units and the cabinet and the crossover, but you also have the individual materials that go into, say, a drive unit, the speaker cone, the dust cap, the voice coil, the spider, the surround, the chassis. There are just so many constituent parts that what we find is that each single part is incredibly important to the whole. They all have to marry together so that you end up with something where you're not listening to the particular tone of the speaker. You're not even listening to the loudspeaker at all. You're just listening to the music. And music itself consists of not just notes, not just loud and soft bits, but also silences. So what happens during those silences is also incredibly important to the way that you perceive the musical performance. So we have to brace and damp the box so that it doesn't make a noise when you're expecting silence between the notes. And we do that in a variety of ways. For example, I came up with, for Wharfedale, a multi-layered sandwich approach to building the main wood of the box, which reduces the resonances that are in the panels and also damping the interior of the box so that the sound from the inside doesn't get to the outside in an audible way. So these aspects of all these components, all the materials that we use, have to come together in something which not just delivers a even tonal balance, if you like, a smooth frequency response. And of course, now we have modern recordings which give you very explicit detail. And that's really, really exciting for a hi-fi designer, because we can start to reproduce those details and give you those musical overtones in a way that you'd never heard before in products from the 70s and 80s. So to do that, we have to start looking at new technologies. For example, the AMT that we developed for Elysian series. I wanted a treble unit which really relished and relayed those harmonic overtones that you get naturally from instruments and voices, which adds so much to the richness of sound and the musicality of the performance. At the other end of the range, I've mentioned it already, the SLPP, the slot-loaded profiled port. This was based on an idea that Gilbert Briggs had back in the late 50s, where he was working with methods of controlling the performance of bass units in a cabinet. This is what I would call a small baffled speaker. In other words, the area around the drive unit is a very small area. And that gives me, as an acoustic designer, a problem, because the high frequency sounds are radiated to you, the listener, directly forward, reflected by the small confines of the baffle. But as soon as the notes drop lower and the wavelength of the sound gets longer, the sound from the bass unit starts to bleed round the outside of the cabinet. And no longer are you getting sound directly pressured forward from the speaker, but you're also getting sound coming from the rest of the room reaching your ears. This drive unit, when you put it on a big baffle, would be capable of delivering 90 decibels for 1 watt. When we put it in a small baffle like this, we drop to around 85 decibels for 1 watt. So we've lost 5 dBs of sound pressure level just by putting it in a small cabinet. So when I wanted to recreate a classic like the Wharfedale Linton, I wanted to produce a large baffled speaker with a larger bass unit in it, not just because the bass unit was bigger, but also because the baffle of the speaker that was bigger. With a speaker the size of the Linton, we can now generate sound pressure levels down to low frequencies of 90 dB for 1 watt all over again. So we can realize the full potential of the drive units that we're putting into this loudspeaker, and we can make it blend into the room in terms of the pressure of sound that it can put into the room, as well as the sound that you hear directly from the loudspeaker. And that makes the speaker sound much more natural. It means that my job as an acoustic designer is simpler, and that's always a good thing. And it also means that the music sounds much more natural, much more enjoyable, and much more exciting and emotional. But I don't want you to think that we're just involved with the technicalities of every part of a loudspeaker. Much of what I do is actually judged by listening. Yes, we have very clever software which allows me to get the bare bones of a loudspeaker together for a prototype. But from that point on, I have what I call an iteration between measurement and listening and going to the software, and then more measurement and more listening, and then going back to the software. And the major part of that is listening. It's what we can hear that makes the difference, because our ears and our brains are incredibly complex in the way that they react to music. And also they are very, very good measuring tools, far better measuring tools than we have available for measuring any of the things that are involved in speaker performance. And so there has to be a point at which the technical aspects are left behind, and you get involved with listening to music and fine-tuning the product until it gives you the musical result you want. Now, I'm not the only person that does that. Farid Azima at Mission, for example, when he was designing one of Mission's earliest products, the Mission 770, he also spent many, many hundreds of hours working with reviewers from magazines. I was even present at one of his fine-tuning sessions with Paul Benson, editor of Hi-Fi Answers, and listened to the way that he worked on the 770 in order to get it to the way he wanted. So when it comes to recreating products, I'm really, really excited to be working on a new version of the 770, which at IAG we're actually designing and putting together for manufacture in our new Huntington production facility, which has been developed over the past 18 months to be a tour de force for design and production in the UK. "770 heralds the return of manufacturing to our UK base, where our 25,000 square foot facility is going to be used not just for Mission, but for our other brands and products like Wharfedale and Quad and Castle, and coming up Leek. And as well as the manufacturing production line, we are also introducing a brand new anechoic chamber for measuring products, as well as helping with our UK-based design work, and new QC facilities which will cover the manufacturing of all types of products that we're carrying on here in Huntington, the home of British Hi-Fi.